G'day from Fremantle, Australia. And it's, you know, every time I do a video here from Fremantle, I can't help but to smile because this has been a dream of mine for years. For years. I'm 57 years old and I've been looking at this dot on a map, just, well, Perth to be specific, but Fremantle is just outside of Perth. And, you know, to be able to walk these streets is just, it's a dream come true. And I love sharing some of the things that are here. And one of which is a very, well, it is a very special place. It's a World Heritage Site. And I'm not sure if it's Western Australia's only World Heritage Site. I think it is, but it's the prison. It's the Fremantle prison. And I'm gonna take you for a walk and talk through the prison here. And I've seen it from the outside. I haven't seen it from the inside yet. And that's what I'm gonna do. And this path here actually is gonna take us, I should say, right up to the prison itself. And you can take tours and what have you. And as you're coming in, look at this sculpture here. You see the guard coming along with the chain gang, so to speak. You see? Fremantle Prison, the convict establishment. Look at that. So it is really a beautiful day, and as I turn the camera, you'll see the massive entrance to the prison just up ahead. So we're gonna go and do a wonderful walk through what probably was at one time not a very wonderful place. And they have some signs here. This is the National Heritage Site right here. Fremantle Prison was placed on the National Heritage List on August 1st, 2005. It was the first Western Australian historic site to be included alongside national icons such as the Sydney Opera House, Port Arthur Historic Site, and Royal Exhibition Building in Melbourne. So it is quite a famous place, and I was correct. It is a World Heritage Site. Welcome to Fremantle Prison. In July 2010, 11 convict sites from around Australia, including Fremantle Prison, were placed on the World Heritage List. This serial listing of Australian convict sites recognizes the international significance of the story of forced migration of more than 165,000 convicts to Australia between 1788 and 1868. It's the only World Heritage Site in Perth and the only built World Heritage Site in all of Western Australia. Fremantle Prison now sits beside iconic international heritage sites such as the Pyramids of Giza and the Great Wall of China as a place of outstanding world significance. So let's go inside and check this place out. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's just 5 after 4 here, and I've got a ticket for the 4:30 tour. I opted for the 4:30 instead of the 4 so I could share a little bit of the front of the building with you. And this right here would be what's called the terrace. And the site of Fremantle Prison was originally chosen for its close proximity to the town and the harbor. Its elevated location caught the fresh sea winds, which it was believed would help prevent disease. The limestone ridge above Fremantle town was leveled, and the stone was used in construction of these buildings here. The building project included not only accommodations for convicts, but for prison officers as well. The frontage of the prison, now known as the terrace, was originally called the Esplanade. So during the 1850s, 4 main houses, as well as the gatehouse, were constructed on the terrace. So I'm going to take a walk at, this is number 14. This would be the Chief Warden's residence right here. Look at this. Boy, it's almost as if I have this place all to myself. This would have been the Chief Warden's home right here. And I would imagine that probably the convicts were the ones that would tend to the garden, maybe, or maybe not. But look at how beautiful it is. Just gorgeous. And all the while you got these massive walls. There's the chief warden's residence right there. It's a beautiful day today. Just really, really gorgeous. I'm gonna take a shortcut over to the next building, and in doing so, hope there's no snakes in the bush. You always have it in the back of your mind. So here's the other building here. I'm not quite sure what this is, but I'm sure if I step out, I think they're using this as an education facility now. Look at that. And there's your wall right there. I'm just backing out. I'm sure there's probably a sign here that tells you what this is. This is number 18. This would have been the surgeon's residence. That's what we were just looking at. The surgeon's residence. Wow. He was responsible for the health of the prisoners. And that would have been his home right there. All right, let's go look at some of the rest of the buildings in front of the prison. And just over to the left of the entrance to the prison would be the Gatekeepers Residents. The gatehouse, including number 12 and 14 and the 2 towers flanking the main gate, was completed in 1855. The gatekeeper was responsible for monitoring and opening the inner and outer gates to allow people to enter and exit the prison. Isn't that something? That would have been the Gatekeepers Residence right there. And marker number 8, this would have been the chaplain's residence right here. It's going to be interesting to go in and walk in such a historic building as this. Here they have a monument. This stone stands witness to the courage of the Aboriginal peoples in their fight for human rights in Australia, erected 28th of September 1994. All right, so the tour should be starting relatively shortly. These are the last two buildings here, 2, 4, and 6, which would have been the guard room, the warderers residence or residences, and the female division here. Look at this. I would imagine these buildings now are probably the better part of 100, 170, or something like that, 180, 80 years old. All right, let's go take the tour. Well, without further ado, let's go on and be behind these walls here. Oh, if these walls could talk, huh? Look at that. Really, really something to be walking in here. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. So they probably have the better part of about 5 minutes before the tour starts, and they have some buildings in here and some exhibits that you can visit that I'll share with you. Just up here they've got the visitor room. This would have been, I imagine, where visitors were allowed to come and visit prisoners, and then they have the visitor center right next to it. Look at this. They get upset when they have to come and see me in here because we're a real close-knit family and we all stick together. The kids miss me more than anyone else. That was a prisoner in 1989. So they were actually using this prison facility right up until the 1980s, I believe, the last prisoner. With all this, I don't know if this is, well, that would be footage of the prison right there, I would think, probably toward the end. Looks like they were eating pretty good. Look at that. Wow. You got all types of information here about the prison. The noises were great. The clanking of the keys in the locks, the closing of the gates and the doors, people walking up and down the granite stone. You could hear a screw coming for miles along the wooden platform outside your cell. At night you would hear the usual chatter of crimes. That was a prisoner in the 1970s. Wow. We will go and take a look at the, over here they have the Convict Depot, whatever that was. The Convict Depot. Originally this area was the chief wardener's yard. An outdoor toilet, bath, and copper troughs were located here. They also included a woodshed and accessors to the underground cellar. Very interesting. Transport office. We'll go look at the gift shop. The tour is just about to start. So I'll see if I can't share the gift shop, which is always interesting. Here we go. Look at this. Little teddy bears. The convict bear. Sure my mother would appreciate one of those. Wonderful. Very nice. Get yourself a hat, pair of convict pajamas. I'm assuming that's probably what the maybe this is what they wore, something similar to this. All right, let's go and get on the tour. And here we go on the convict tour. So all three of us. Not a lot of people here. It's a Friday afternoon, and this is where we're going to start, right into the reception room. And I'll share as much of it as I can. But look at this room here.
Be seated. Now, normally we don't get this intimate.
Alright, so this would be the showers here, obviously.
I should point out to you, these are the good showers too. You don't get, these aren't everyday showers. These are the showers, you're going to use these ones when you first get here. When you leave,
Alright, we found our way into the yard.
So this is the last convict-built prison in Australia. So it's hand-built by British convicts. So we had transportation from Britain beginning in 1850. So our convict period comes much later than the other states. So by the time we started taking convicts, the other states had all pretty much stopped, except for Tasmania. So we had transportation. We had just under 10,000 men sent out over the course of 18 years, so 1850 to 1868. Sent over from Britain here to build all the infrastructure of what eventually becomes Perth and Fremantle, starting with their own prison. Four divisions inside the main cell block, which are meant to house separate categories of prisoner. Now, over on the other side of that wall, red brick building on the other side, is the women's section, which was in use until 1970, which we will be seeing later. Now, this grassed area with the bitumen, this is not an exercise area. This is called the parade ground. This is just a means of accessing different areas of the prison. So in the convict period, the convicts would be performing muster out the front before they were sent out into the town to work. In the modern era, this is just a means of accessing different areas of the prison, usually under escort by prison officers. They might be needing to go to work over in the West workshops, which is where the archers are. Over on the left, we have the boot shop, print shop and tailor shop. They might be coming out of the main cell block and going off to work. You might have trustee inmates who can go unescorted. They have a pass which they'll need to show from time to time whenever there's an officer about, or it might be someone doing essential work who can go unescorted, but it is recommended that they hold their pass above their heads, because there will be men up in the gun towers who will be very curious to know why there isn't an escorted prisoner walking on their own, and so you'll have two men up there with 22 caliber rifles watching that person very, very closely. And they also suggest very strongly, walk, don't run. Pretty stupid idea.
All right, although not part of the tour, look at the garden here. They just started this garden not even 12 months ago, and it's not part of the tour, but the tour guide was kind enough to let me just take a moment and film it and show it to you. Boy, it looks beautiful. What a beautiful garden. Well, here we go inside the largest single cell block in the southern hemisphere. And here we go. Oh, this is an interesting tour. The tour guide is just a wonderful man named Tristan, and there's only two of us on the tour. And he was saying that because of the pandemic, a lot of the people that work here, they weren't giving tours, so the employees, they weren't going to be laid off because they're government employees, so they decided to build that garden that we were looking at just outside, and they maintain that garden, and a lot of the food goes to different charities, if you will.
Day-to-day running. So there's 1,000,001 jobs that need to be done in any prison, and in here the jobs were largely done by the inmates themselves. Any job you can think of was largely done by the inmates. The best job and the most desired job is working in the kitchens. This is just the cleaning area. So if you have a look up at the ceiling and the windows, you can see there is no ventilation, no air conditioning. So in a typical summer when it's 40-something degrees and this is all full of steam, you can imagine this is going to be a pretty intense and unpleasant place to work. Kitchens are going to be really busy because you're going to have 40 to 50, possibly even less kitchen staff pumping out 3 meals a day for every single inmate. 1980s, you're looking 400 to 450 people in this prison, so close to 1,500 meals a day. Who knows that? We tell people Western Australia because we want them to come here. Wait a while. That's right. And the prison is one of the best examples because of how long it takes for things to change, because things took a very long time to change in this prison. So early 20th century in this prison, they were using steamers. And then, as we can see by this photo down here at the end of the 20th century, they're using steamers. It took a very long time for change to occur. And that's pretty typical in a prison because there's very little incentive for governments to spend money in a quieter area where you're away from other inmates. So you're away from troublemakers, problematic people, because people want to be in the kitchens. It's a desirable position, and if you misbehave, you'll get kicked out. You have to then show that you can behave yourself. You would then have to apply to go to the waiting list to be allowed to work back in the kitchens again, and that could be years. So in their outside area, they've got weightlifting gear, punching bags, typical stuff that you see in films. Flushing toilets, obviously, but we have other bonuses like showers. Now, The other showers that we walked past, in this prison in 1991, you got a maximum of 3 showers a week, one of which was compulsory. So you could go a week between showering if you wanted to. Kitchen staff were given showers beginning and end of their shifts. Also, changes of clothes. You had to, obviously we need to maintain hygiene. Yard like this one, you're going to be out here usually from about 8:30 in the morning until about 3:45 in the afternoon. In the modern era, this was the only communal dining area. So lunch is outside in the yards from the mid-1960s onwards. Breakfast and dinner is in the cell. So this is the only time you're going to be having lunch with other meals with other people. So what do you do when you're out here? The best advice I've ever heard is that you keep your head down and you don't cause any problems, because there's always going to be someone much bigger than you are who's going to cause problems if you cause problems. So you've got to keep yourself occupied and find a way to get through it. So they had access to what was at one point the largest prison library in the country. They can access sporting equipment, all the weightlifting gear, punching bags. You can buy cards, you can buy board games, anything to keep yourself occupied.
You know, it's interesting that this prison was in use just 30 years ago, and this would have been the yard. You come out and spend the better part of all day in here. Isn't that something? Wow. Look at those walls.
Between 50 to 100 inmates in a yard of this sort of size. And again, like the other yard, you're out here roughly 8:30 in the morning till about 3:45 in the afternoon. You're out here no matter what the weather's doing. So in the middle of winter it might be 14 degrees and bucketing down. Middle of summer it might be 40 something degrees, boiling hot, tough. The original shelters certainly in the convict era would have been no larger than that small one there. The big shelters only went up towards the end of the 1960s. So very little in the way of shelter. You'd have had competition. Horrible.
You can see here where they had the there's your free throw line there. They had a basketball court here, and then they also had a tennis court. And these murals on the walls were done probably in the 1980s, 1990s. Boy, I'm glad Tristan just pointed this out. These are pictures of those same murals I was just showing you. Look at the original. Isn't that something? So this is exactly what we were just looking at, but they're all faded now. Now look at this last one here. Isn't that something? So that was that last mural there on the wall. There's an emu. Wow. So that right there was actually right there. You wouldn't have known. All right, and this would have been your view coming in from a day in the yard, so to speak. Wow. Look at this. Wow. Boy, this kind of has a eerie feeling about it. It sure does. And look at the fencing here, which must have been to protect people from throwing stuff down from up above.
Often throwing themselves down from up above.
Throwing themselves down from up above.
Yeah, 1921 that went up. After it was first requested in 1900. So that's a good example of wait a while. Because if you fall off from that top level, by the time you hit the bottom, that's not going to be very pleasant. But it's really important to kind of point out to you that this has not changed. So this is almost identical to how it looked when it closed in 1991. We've not really made many changes for it, and it's not really all that different to how it looked in 1855 when it first opened. So the biggest differences between 1855 and 1991 is that we have a cement floor, which only went in 1980. So it was bare flagstones for about 120 odd years.
Look at their
The
prison
suicide net went
timetable.
up in 1921. Electric
6:45,
light,
wake
about
up bell. All prisoners be dressed and ready for unlock. Look at that. Lights out at 11:15 at night.
Now, Tom, and
Now-
your viewers, come and look at this.
Tom and my viewers, come and look at this.
To really give you an idea of just how bad the conditions are, look down
Look down.
and tell me what that is.
Is that a latrine?
It is a latrine. When do you think that would date from?
Oh, I don't know. What, 1991?
1991.
Oh my goodness.
So there is no plumbing.
There's no plumbing.
There's no plumbing.
So in 1991 they were using buckets.
Now remember, it's one bucket per cell, not per person.
1 bucket per cell.
You will usually have,
Not per
by
person.
1991, you're typically going to have 2 people sharing a cell.
2 people in a cell.
Breakfast and dinner in the cell.
Oh no.
You can't just knock on the door in the middle of the night to say, I want to go to the toilet, because you've got a bucket right there with you. Remember, you have your breakfast and your dinner in the cell as well, and you are in that cell for about 16 hours.
Wow.
And in the middle of summer, when it's going to be 40 degrees outside, we do have records of it being, even in 1988, of it getting up to 50 degrees up at the top.
What's giving these tours, Tristan? What is one of the most common questions you get asked? I'm going to ask you a question. I just want to know how common it is.
Oh, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Tell me the question, and I'll tell you how common it is.
All right. How many people have escaped out of this prison?
Hundreds.
Hundreds of people have
Hundreds.
escaped out of this prison.
But it depends how we're quantifying escaping. Are we talking getting out? Because any idiot can get out of a prison. That's the easy bit. Where do you go from there?
Yeah.
How do you avoid recapture?
But digging tunnels, did they dig tunnels? Did they, there were no helicopters flying in the 1800s to,
Nope.
People,
because in the convict era, the convicts were often outside the prison and they were distributed throughout the state to work on things like road building, building bridges, building government infrastructure. So often escapes were just simple running away from road gangs. There are instances of people climbing over the wall. There's at least one instance of people digging a hole through the wall itself. And escapes were reasonably common, but where do you go? That's the thing of Western Australia, is how remote we are from everything.
wow. All right, so Tristan was just asking me, am I going to film him on this tour? He was feeling a little bit left out. He didn't want just the voice. He wanted people to be able to put a...
To make sure you get my good side. Not see all
Your
the
good side.
grey
All
in
right,
my
turn
beards.
around, mate.
No. Now, what's your
All right,
step?
what's your step? Oh, look at... Oh, boy. Oh, I know what this is. Oh, boy. Look at this.
So executions were carried out throughout the state. Most of them were done at the Perth jail, which eventually closed in 1888, and it was decided to carry out executions in Fremantle prison from that point onwards. So after that, this became the only site of legal execution in Western Australia. So in that time, all of the executions were for people convicted of murder and then sentenced to death. So not every murderer was executed, but everyone executed was a murderer. We had 44 executions in total, all from men, with the exception of a woman in 1909. A woman called Martha Rendell, who was convicted of the murder of one of her stepchildren and was presumed to be responsible for the deaths of 2 more of her stepchildren. that was a big, there was a big controversy about it in Perth at the time because a lot of people were opposed to the death penalty. A lot of people were opposed to the execution of a woman. And there was also a lot of evidence to suggest that she was innocent of these deaths. A lot of people also believed that she was guilty, and there's a lot of evidence either way to suggest she was innocent, a lot to suggest that she was guilty.
So they would just stand on this floor.
On that trap, which would
on that trap,
be closed.
They would just, that would be closed, and they would stand there, and somebody would just...
So typically they're held on death row over in the New Division building. There's no special meal the night before. They get the same meal as everybody else. On the day of the execution, it's usually carried out at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning. So they would be woken up at 5:45, given a shower, changed into a white uniform, and then put into a holding cell in the solitary confinement building, which is behind us. They would then be offered a visit from a priest if they wanted. Usually about 10-15 minutes before 8 o'clock, they would be offered a couple of shots of scotch or brandy to steady their nerves. They would then be collected by 4 officers who are called cornermen, and their job is to act as an escort. They also have a practical role. If the prisoner is too scared to walk, these 4 men can pick him up and carry him. When they get to the door of the gallows here, they will put restraints around their ankles and their wrists. They'll place a hood over their head. The prisoner will be marched to stand on top of the trap. The cornermen will then hold them by their shoulders while the rope is pulled down, just so they don't struggle. They will then step back and hold onto the railings. Now, over on the other side, we'll have a doctor, 1 or 2 senior officials, maybe the priest, if the prisoner wants the priest to be here with them. They'll then be asked if they have any last words, throw the lever, trap opens, and we're done.
And when was the last execution?
26th of October 1964. So we're in Division 3, which was typically used for violent crime. And then I can just talk you through these display cells. This first one is isolation. So this is for someone who is at risk of being attacked by other inmates. Someone who has been convicted of other crimes that people may not take kindly to. So you'll often find sex offenders, pedophiles, but then you also have people who might be, for example, an ex-cop. If you end up with someone that used to be a police officer and they end up in prison and other people find out, they're in trouble. So for protective isolation, you might find somebody in a cell like this. They don't get free movement either. They're still following the same timetable as everybody else, coming and going outside to the yards. So they would still have toilet buckets. Next one along is an observation cell. So if you have someone who is at high risk of self-harm, they might have to go under a 24-hour watch to ensure that they do not harm themselves in any way.
Who's the man that like I think like serious sexual assault?
Yeah.
Wow.
Late 80s. So
86.
he was here before?
Yeah, he was here from about end of 86 until 1991.
Look at this, 1860 to 1870.
So when the prison was first built as a convict establishment, the convicts were here to sleep and eat and have their main meals. During the day, they're largely outside. So it was built with 500 of these cells, all measuring 4 foot by 7, which is 1.2 by 2.1 meters. So that is for one inmate. They remained looking like that until we get into the 1890s. And we have a Royal Commission. One recommendation of the Royal Commission is to increase the size of the cells, and they were able to do that because the prison population had dropped quite low and they had a fair bit of spare room, so they were able to knock out every second wall and seal up every second door. So now we have a double-sized cell. Beds were only introduced in the 1950s, so it's hammocks, about 100 years.
So they're taken through a timeline of the cells. They went from hammocks to cots. I can't even begin to imagine. That does not look very comfortable.
No.
Ooh.
So these are 1980s. these last ones, the ones with the artwork in them. Now, you couldn't mark your cell in any way, but as I said earlier, some of the rules were beginning to be relaxed. And then in 1991, people on the art program were given permission to paint their cells if they were of good behaviour. But I should point out the cell you're in at the moment was for a bloke who was allowed to begin painting in 1988. And
1988.
he was a very violent serial sex offender, and allowing him to paint was a method of keeping him calm. He's still alive. He came through home on tour a few years back.
Wow.
Is he okay?
I haven't met him for this.
Look at that.
Changes?
So they allowed him to paint because they kept him calm. That's something.
It must be very different being a prison officer because you have to go through on a daily basis of having to. So they have electric.
Here's another cell. Look at this. He had a little TV. You see. But this was their life.
So with something like a TV, you'd have to purchase it out of your own pocket. It's subject to your behaviour, and it's at your own risk. So if someone smashes it, that's your problem. You misbehave, you'll get locked away. Roof is Jarrah, and that's all suffered extensive smoke damage. The lighter roof is Oregon pine, and that is a result of the fire from 1988, which was deliberately lit during what became one of the worst prison riots in Australian history. Kicked off on the 4th of January 1988, when a group of inmates took 5 prison officers hostage and set fire to the building. The causes of the riot, there's a bit of argument. Some people believe it was pre-planned as a diversion during which some inmates would try to escape, and in the end the escape attempt wasn't carried out. But it does also appear that many of the inmates wanted the attention of the media to highlight the fact that they were still being kept in 1850s conditions in 1988. There had also been a number of allegations that there may have been some assaults against inmates. There was a lot of tension. That summer it was also 42 degrees for 3 days running, so getting up to 50 degrees each day up at the top level. So it was very hot, it was very tense. 1850s conditions in 1988, you know, you're looking at, it's a powder keg, it's ready to go.
All right, now we just stepped into the new division.
New division. So new division was opened in 1907, and this was built largely because of the population growth from our gold rushes of the 1890s. And the population of Western Australia tripled in a little under 10 years. And so there was a lot more, much higher population, meaning much more space is required within the prison. It's not too different from the rest of the other cell block, the main cell block. The main difference is here is that we've only got 3 levels rather than 4. The cells are just a fraction bigger. The doors are bigger because people were generally a little bit taller by the time this was under construction. But what's really remarkable about New Division is that even though they had the opportunity to put plumbing in when it was built, they also could have easily connected it to sewage. The prison was fully connected to sewage by the 1890s, so long before this was constructed. Even despite all that, they still didn't put any plumbing or sewage in, so there's still no toilets.
Wow.
And again, used right up until 1991, except that certainly by the 1970s, New Division was usually referred to as the Misfits Division. So this is for people who might be psychologically unwell. So you typically only ever have one person at a time in these cells. It's also the reason why we have all of the observation cells as well. So this is going to be people who are at risk of self-harm.
No suicide net.
There was.
There was.
There was. It's just been removed after. Many of the outbuildings were leased out to different agencies.
Wow.
So it was removed after that. I can let you know.
All right, if only to give you the full effect. I asked Tristan to close the door on me, and I hope he's going to open it back up. But look at this. Just imagine, this is your life. 4 walls, And the faint light from a window. Oh my goodness. I think it's 4 by 8 or something like that. Oh, wow. All right, let me out. Well, there's your tour, folks, of the Fremantle prison here in beautiful Fremantle, Western Australia. Wow, look at that. What an impressive building. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed the tour, and maybe the tour's not over yet. Tristan is motioning me over into this direction here, so maybe there's more to share.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
We've got to go see the women's prison.
Oh, the women's prison.
Yeah.
Sure. Gotta go see the women's prison. What would the tour be without seeing the women's prison?
Well, speaking of women, there's one now.
All right.
We have a very, very ugly woman.
What do you
Oh.
two people on your tour
This
for?
ugly woman probably doesn't want to be on camera either.
He doesn't disarm with a laser to do
Over
the
here,
camera.
madam. So everything on this side of that wall, this is the women's section. This was in use until 1970. Now, when the prison closed in 91, most of the outer buildings were leased out to different organisations. The women's section became Fremantle TAFE, which is a further education facility, usually focusing on vocational training. So Fremantle TAFE was where they did, for example, all of their jewellery making courses, metalworks. So they occupied all of the women's section for about 15 years. Nowadays, the entire women's prison is a youth hostel. So it's a YHA, you can come and stay, except they've been closed since COVID, obviously. So we only have access to this one small section.
Wow.
This is the women's punishment area. So this is for ladies who have been breaking the rules. So the
The
typical cell
women's
would be the same as the men's.
punishment area.
So only the toilet buckets. So this is for ladies who have been breaking the rules within the prison itself.
Yes. Kind of an eerie video to do, I gotta tell you.
Much later on. Yeah, long after the women were moved out and nothing. Highlighting.
Tristan was
the,
just pointing out, what is this called?
This is a charge sheet.
Uh-huh.
This is for a woman called Julia Lillywhite, who was born in 1892, born in Fremantle, and it really highlights the way that women were treated far harsher. We had much stronger class divisions, social divisions, gender divisions, ethnic divisions as well. So Julia Lillywhite's story is quite tragic. You can see that she gets convicted of stealing in 1928 in Perth. Sorry, not 1928, 1919. I tell you a lie.
Uh-huh.
She gets 7 days. All of these are her crimes. So stealing, unlawful possession, and they tend to be relatively short sentences, up to 2 months. But I mean, you don't tend to steal shoes and clothes or cloth or baby's shoes because you're going to go and make huge amounts of money. You tend to steal those things because you are impoverished and you don't have anything. Imprisoning women for 1 month for obscene language, this is poverty. This is a class distinction. And then look what happens to her afterwards. Like everyone, or like many people in these sorts of adverse conditions, she falls into a life of addiction. Habitual drunkard, drunk. These are people that should be receiving support and assistance. They're being allowed to fall through the cracks, often because of their gender.
Wow.
They're really sad stories. I mean, I would say that she's probably stealing babies' shoes, probably because she needs them. And other ones, when I mentioned to do with ethnicity, for example, Rose Williams was born in Hobart. I don't know anything about her, but she's clearly she's not Anglo-Saxon. I wouldn't be surprised if she's possibly Islander. She could be possibly Tasmanian Aboriginal. And so again, these are all petty crimes that people
Disorderly.
Yeah, loitering in the street, vagrancy, idleness.
Wow.
And then she has been convicted in Mount Magnet on June the 2nd. And then you will see that's 1916, and then she's died 1 year later at Fremantle, June the 2nd, 1917.
Wow.
Prostitution.
Fascinating.
And you'll see many of them are
Language.
obscene language, seven days. I mean, being of evil fame, 1 month.
Of evil what?
Fame. She's got a bad reputation. She's got a reputation of being a crim. You know, these are horrible, horrible stories.
Vagrancy, loitering for prostitution. Wow. All right, so that now concludes our tour of the Fremantle prison. Thank you, Tristan.
Thank you.
For
I'm going to let you out.
you'll let us out, huh?
Look at our high security.
All right. Well, goodbye. Goodbye, Fremantle prison. Hope you folks enjoyed the tour.